Common knowledge has been that the early Mustangs that were produced in 1964 rolled off the assembly line March 9, 1964. That's been the common knowledge that everyone seems to assume because of the story that they've heard. But now I want to tell you something, that story is incorrect. Now there's another story that goes on March 5th, 1964. Pre-production Mustangs, the ones that were produced prior to the first day of production, which was March 9th, 1964, rolled off the assembly line. Now we know from research today that there's approximately 211 pre-production Mustang convertibles and coupes. Now from those cars that were produced, they went in different places all over the world. I'm going to give you an example. The number one Mustang, the one that everybody talks about, was not a car built here for the United States. That was a pre-production car. That car on the DSO on the door tag had a designated specific purpose. It was to be sent to Canada, which it was. It was an export car. So that car was not a car intended to do anything here in America other than being sent to Canada for promotional purposes. Now, as we move along with all the pre-production cars, they all had a special purpose. Some of them went to the World's Fair. That was a very important part of the promotion for Ford, that they shipped all the cars over there, some of the very early ones, to be used in a Walt Disney ride, and people actually got into the car and went around a track inside, pulled by a conveyor belt, and they went through the history of the world from prehistoric times all the way into the future. It was really cool. Walt Disney was a great creator, and Ford was in a co-op with them on this whole Disney ride at the 1964 World's Fair. What they did with those cars, in order to use them and pull them with a conveyor belt, they took out the engine, transmission, they took out the gas tank, the fuel lines, and they pulled these cars around on a conveyor belt. When the cars were done, they no longer used them for the ride, because you can imagine, if you got 2,000 or 3,000 people a day opening and closing cars and getting in and out of interiors, and it was full of passengers, you can imagine what's going to happen to the interior. Hours and hours and hours of use. They had to replace the interior. Well, what they did, they took the cars back to a warehouse in New York. They put the engine, the trans, the gas tank, because they were all marked, back into the cars. They put interior back in the cars. They shipped the cars back to Detroit. Then Ford took the cars and sold them to employees. That's how some of the pre-production cars got out to the public, because prototype and pre-production cars were never intended for public use. All of the pre-production cars have a DSO specifically for special use by Ford. Now, today is Tuesday, it's not Tuesday, is it, Jeremy? Today is Friday, July 2nd, 2007. And we are going to show you something in its history. After 44 years, no one has ever seen, no one has ever done what we're about to do. I'm standing next to Mustang Convertible number 140. Now, number 140 is a 05C pre-production car. The 05C is the designated date that the car was supposedly built on the assembly line. But I'm going to tell you today that number one, all the way through to approximately 211, never saw an assembly line. Those cars were hand-built, and they were built approximately in January and February of 1964. The 05C door tag date that was given to them were primarily used for all of the pre-production cars for a designated date. But they never opened up the assembly line on the 5th day of March and turned on a switch, and all of a sudden these cars rolled off the line. Didn't happen. Now we're going to prove that to you beyond a shadow of a doubt, because this car that I'm standing next to, as beautiful as it is going to be completely stripped down to the bare metal, and you are going to see all the factory welds cut. You're going to see all the welds that were hand welded in this car. This is a hand-assembled car. We go through this piece by piece by piece. You're going to understand the difference between what makes a pre-production prototype car and an actual car that was built on the assembly line. Common knowledge is that on March 9, 1964, when the Dearborn plant in Mustang opened up that morning, car number 1 rolled off the assembly line. That's the Mustang that we see in the Henry Ford Museum. But I'm here to tell you today that that car didn't roll off the assembly line on March 9th, 1964. Now, through a lot of research over the past 44 years, there's another story that's been discovered, that there were pre-production convertibles and coupes that were built prior to March 9th, 1964. But those cars were supposedly built, including number 1 in all the pre-production convertibles and coupes, on March 5th, 1964. But I'm here to tell you today that that's not true either, because all the pre-production prototype cars were cars that were hand-built and they were pre-assembled outside of a warehouse of Detroit, and they were merely given an 05C date on the door tag for documentation purposes. The car that I'm standing next to is Mustang number 140, a convertible. This is a pre-production convertible. It is a car that was supposedly produced on March 5th because that's what the door tag says. But we know that this car was hand-built. And today, for the first time ever, you're going to sit back and experience something that no one has ever known about Mustangs or for the history of Mustangs. This car is going to be completely stripped down to bare metal. We're going to expose all of the welding that was done on this car and the lead work and a lot of other things that were custom, because this is a hand-built car, and we're going to be able to prove that to you, and you will know beyond a shadow of a doubt when this process that we're doing is completed that this car was hand-built and it was not built in 4 or 5 minutes on the assembly line on March 5th, 1964. I'm standing next to my buddy here, newfound acquaintance, Mr. Nate Miller of Buckeye Automotive Restoration out here in Boardman, Ohio. And he has been hired for the job of taking this number 140 pre-production prototype Mustang and giving it a facelift. Now, Nate is an MCA Gold award winner, and he does top-level concourse restorations. And Nate, just explain to the folks out there a little bit about what that all means, because there's a whole difference between someone that can restore a car and someone and a concourse restoration.
Concourse restoration is the way it came out of the factory the day it was built. So you have the paint marking as a primer, you know, correct primer overspray, correct sound deadener. How the engine compartment looks, absolutely correct. When I show them in the MCA shows, they're 100% the way they came off the assembly line, and they look absolutely gorgeous.
And when you restore one, obviously, you got to have all the correct parts to make it that way. And we're not talking about a lot of reproduction parts. We try to restore cars correctly as possible with NOS parts if possible.
Correct.
Okay. Now, when you started looking at this car, you and I went around it, and we found a lot of differences in this car than we found with some of the other cars, right?
Correct.
Now, Nate, this is a pre-production car number 140. You went around, I went around it, we've looked at this car pretty close, and we found a lot of differences. Now, we're going to strip this car, or you're going to strip this car, you and your crew, and we're going to take it down to bare metal and disassemble it. We're hoping we're going to find some unique things about it, which I'm sure we're going to.
We can definitely see them right now.
Yeah, so it's going to be a surprise. So I want you to take us through here, and you and I are going to start walking around this car, and I want you to point out and go into detail what this is all about, some of the things that we've seen, because this car is definitely hand-built. What do you say?
I say so, too.
All right.
Now, first thing we're going to point out is the early stamping of the front valance, which is right here, and also in the front of the car, which is
the lower part.
The lower part, right in here.
We found a couple tabs there that were sticking up. That's very unique.
Weird. Yep.
And the regular production cars didn't have that, right?
Correct.
Okay. Now, going up here, you were looking at the bolts in here.
The bolts here are very unique. I say they're original to the car because of how they're all the same. But also with the strange welds in here, you can definitely see how this is welded in here from the hand welds in here back this way.
Yeah, now a lot of the welds that we looked, this is actually a pretty sloppy weld. Probably something that they were, because it wasn't on the assembly line, if you had a different welding machine, and we're talking about technology over 44 years ago, obviously, so I see a lot of slag. This isn't a very clean weld here at all, right?
Correct. Yeah, you're 100% correct. Also, which I forgot to point out here, is the spot welds are done on this side of the inner fender apron here. The production vehicles were done on the back side, so you never saw the spot welds inside the engine compartment.
Yeah, and some of those spot welds we're going to be looking at in the door jambs that were done by hand, and it looks like they heated up the metal quite a bit and went right through.
Right, correct.
Okay, now we can see, and you and I were talking about this earlier, we've got the VIN number exposed here pretty well, and we could tell that the 4 wasn't a clean stamp all the way through here. Now we have another alternate VIN up here and over here, correct?
Correct.
When this is pulled off.
We'll reveal that as soon as we pull the fenders off.
Right, and then we'll be inspecting those a little bit to see how they look. And we've got another car behind us here, and Jeremy shot some of that, and we were looking and we saw one of the alternate VINs had a double stamp.
Correct.
There's a K-code convertible
Correct.
back here. So things weren't perfect even on the assembly line. The car behind us was produced on the assembly line. This car is a pre-production car, which we know definitely, by everything that we're looking at, everything we're pointing out, this is a hand-built car. There's absolutely no question to it. We noticed this too here is a little bit more evidence of some welding that's
sort of
unique.
Yep, and unique.
Yeah. Now, walking around here, we got back over here to the back, the door frame here. And let's talk about what we found inside here in the door jamb area and the door frame here.
The door post is very unique on how it's put together. There's no seams, there's no spot welds. It looks like it's all lead, just handmade, hand built. And I can't wait to see what it looks like all stripped.
Yeah, and it looks to me like if you would have taken a dolly, right, and if you were just hammering it, trying to form the metal, it's not formed like the production cars are. It's definitely something that they went around to have to actually hand work that in order to get that shape.
Correct.
Now, we were talking about the dashboard, Nate. Can you explain a little bit about what we saw up in here?
The dash pad is definitely original for the car. It's never been out of the car, it looks like. It is very short on the side of the car up here where your door pillar would meet the door post. It's the same as the other way. You can see the original factory paint underneath it. We'll be pulling the dash pad too and see what we got. Hopefully we find a build sheet or something and
yeah, and actually we were looking down in here and you could see all the way down through it. So
Correct.
They really didn't have a real good tight fit. There was a lot of things about these cars that obviously being a prototype or pre-production car, they were trying to figure it out as they went through the process of hand building these cars. And you know, you got to remember, it's almost like building a model. A model has the pieces that are put together, but if any of you've ever built a model, they don't fit all right. You've got to work on them a little bit and adjust everything to make it fit so that you've got a nice fit and finish for the model when you're done. That's sort of what they were doing with a big boy toy, a real car. They were hand assembling this car, so anything that they were doing as they went along, it was experimental, when you say, Nate?
I would say so too.
Now, going down here, we looked at this, and this is just unbelievable.
And you can definitely see the spot weld gun was on different temperatures that day when they built this car. Different welds, they're different temperatures. The spot welds are, some of them are through the steel and some of them aren't. You can definitely see here where they crimped it wrong when they were holding it together. You actually put bends in the steel. Yeah, actually got a real big bend here. Now, looking in here in the door jambs, we're noticing by the rockers how this is filled in. Can you? Obviously we haven't stripped it, so we don't know what we're looking at, but we think this is lead. There's no seams there, so I say it's lead.
Okay.
Absolutely no seams in that car.
We're going to be talking about lead and how hard it is to work with lead and what lead is all about. Because when you come back here now on the rear quarter, explain the seam that's here and the difference between this car and regular production cars.
The seam right here, okay, and the production cars had brass in the corners. This one here is all the way through, so it'd be interesting. Also, there's no welds here and no welds here. It's seamless. It's all filled in. Yes. And we're going to strip this, and we think that this is lead underneath. We'll know as soon as this is stripped, we'll be able to see this. Now, getting back to the seam that's here, and this is what we're talking about here with the seam. Correct. On this car that's being completely restored, you can notice here that Nate was
showing the brass here
and the brass
and
here.
up here. So this is not all the way through like the prototype pre-production car as far as the seam goes. Now another thing that we found, actually your dad was talking about it and he found it, was the wheel well up in the inside. It almost looks like, if you would picture, if you will, a wheel well tub that was made, then all of a sudden they took like a softball or something, and obviously it had to be steel, and formed it out so that it had a form of a like a softball, like a 16-inch softball, to push out on the wheel well.
Correct.
And what do you think that's all about?
I think it's definitely they started making the convertible car and the tops didn't go down, so they had a problem.
Right. Now the difference between that and the K convertible, that's a regular production car, is that you can see the difference that the inside.
Right, and you can see it was done in a press, and this was definitely not pressed in the pre-production car.
And that was hand formed.
Correct.
Again, we're talking about a top trying to go down, and obviously they were concerned about it fitting right. Mm-hmm. That's the reason why they had to form that wheel well the way that they did.
Correct.
Now, going back here, we had talked earlier today, too, that this tail panel is a little bit different, the rear valance. You want to talk a little bit about that, Nate, what you saw and what you know?
We see the rear valance here, not rear valance, excuse me, tail light panel, is no seams whatsoever in the corners at all. A little here, this is almost like a 45 angle where the tail light extension fits, the tail panel, or the quarter panel extension fits, and on a production Mustang, you'll see this here, it's round. It is not at a 45 like that bend. That's very unique, and I'd be interested to see what that looks like when it's all stripped down too.
Yeah, and another thing, and we'll go back to that in a second, but the park lights, the front park lights also are 2-wire instead of 3-wire.
No, 3-wire.
Or 3-wire, I'm sorry.
3-wire instead of 2.
Yeah, the front park lights are 3-wire instead of 2-wire.
Yep.
So we have to go back and show that. So, Jeremy, why don't you bring this up here? So we got that to the end over there, and let's do that right now because that's real important. That's huge. Let's talk about the park lights. There's a difference here in what you found, correct?
The parking lights, which I've never seen before when I've been looking at this car, they have a ground wire attached to them that goes right to a bolt on the frame. Very different, very unique. I look forward to see how that all works together too. So I assume the engine compartment harness is a little different.
Right, so we got 3 wires on a pre-production prototype car, and we only have 2 on regular production.
Correct, right. That goes, well, actually, it goes to a ground, too.
Okay.
Not a ground, but it goes to the headlight harness ground. These one here grounds out separately.
Gotcha.
Different.
Well, I'm excited to see what we're going to find. So this whole car is going to be disassembled, and as we go along, we find out some of the different things that we're going to find. We're going to be showing that to you. We're going to speed this up in time-lapse photography so that this whole process goes very rapid and quickly so we can get this down to bare metal. We will be stopping in between all of that when we find some differences here, and we'll be talking about it.
Let's make history.
Let's do it, buddy.
Let's do it.
Right on.
Now we put number 140 on the rack. The disassembly process is going to be starting here. The whole crew is going to come in, and right before your eyes, they're going to take this car completely apart. Now I want to talk to you about some of the differences of doing paint work the right way, paint work the wrong way, or a quickie paint job. Quickie paint jobs are just ones that most guys pull off the bumpers, take off a few emblems, tape it off, sand it down, shoot it. That's not the right way to do a thorough and a very good paint job. Now, what this car is going to have is going to be stripped down to bare metal. Everything is going to be disassembled. That's the proper way to do a car if you're going to do a perfect concourse paint job. That's the way that Nate Miller at Buckeye Restorations does all the restorations and the paint work that they do here in the great state of Ohio. Now, Jeremy is going to be showing you step by step. This is going to be speeded up, so within a few minutes you're going to see this car from start point now, and it's going to be completely stripped down to bare metal. And then after we get to that point, we're going to be showing you some of the lead work that makes this car a hand-built car over a factory-produced Mustang convertible. We're at day 2 of our strip down of this historic 1964 and a half pre-production prototype Mustang out here at Buckeye Restoration in Boardman, Ohio. And we found a lot of very interesting things, and we're going to talk about that thoroughly, step by step. Some of the things that we found, big things, there was a lot of different modifications that Nate's going to be talking about, and we're going to look at those pretty close. But some of the things that just jumped out at me when we took this car apart tells me what this car's purpose was. I know a lot of pre-production vehicles were considered cars that were show cars for a special purpose, which indeed some of them were. But I do know from what I've seen here, without any question right now, that these cars were experimental. They were cars that they were using to put together and get things right so that the regular production models were all done correctly at the factory, and they had to remodify a lot of the parts. Now, let me give you some examples. When the dash was pulled, it was never out of this car. There is a number on the top of the dash pad. We've never seen anything like that. We're going to show you that. In the inside of the wiring harness, it has got numbers for every plug-in that goes under the back of the circuit panel for the dash board, and it's pretty unique because Jeremy looked at it yesterday, and he has determined that they actually took like Band-Aids or Band-Aid tape and cut it in little pieces and wrote on it. It's unbelievable. But that tells me that possibly what they were doing with this was using it for training. If they would have brought in some of their line workers, it would have been a training session to be able to show them how this had to be hooked up to pre-assemble the dashboard so that they could put it in the car. So there's a lot of different things about this car, and what it is telling us is that these cars were hand assembled. We know that. There's no question about it. There was no way that they rolled down an assembly line. There's absolutely no way that these cars were built in an afternoon or a day. They were worked on as a group, because any of the technical problems that they found, they had to correct for regular production cars. And we're going to be showing you that with the wheel tubs a little bit later, which is amazing how they had to change that. Now, some of the things that we've seen here, like the dash, going back to the dash, Jeremy has shot that so you can see it. They actually took a torch and they cut out the inside of the dash to make a little bit better clearance. Now, on the regular production models, that obstruction that was in the dash is removed. So we're going to be showing you some of that as we go along here, and you can see some of the differences of what this car was and how it was built, hand-built. And as they were going along, they were tweaking this car to get everything right to change what they needed to do on the regular production parts. Now, we do know from this car, we found parts here from 11/11, 1963, parts from December, and parts from January. So all of these pre-production parts that was in this vehicle were already assembled and made and manufactured before they put these cars together. So what they did at that point was to get into a warehouse, which these cars were assembled outside of Detroit, and start working on putting them together. It was just like taking a model. You've got all the parts. Now we're going to put all of the pieces together and make a car out of it. When they did do that, these parts were obviously designed on an engineer's draft board, and they went into regular production. There's not going to fit exactly right. So they had to refit things, and they had to rethink some things, and they had to do some modifications. Those modifications wound up going out into the production cars. So all of these cars, the pre-production cars, definitely were built for the purpose of being able to tweak them. They had to use them for promotions that they were doing, yes, but they also had to use these cars for a lot of the issues that came up from the parts that they had already manufactured, and they had to trim some down, they had to modify some, and this is a very unique situation with this car because up until now, after 44 years, no one has ever discovered or looked into anything like this. And Nate Miller that we're working with here at Buckeye Restoration does a lot of MCA Gold restorations. He knows his way around these cars inside and out, so we're going to be talking to him about some of the other issues that we found and some of the things that are just amazing with this car. So we're going to take a break here, and when we come back, we're going to remove the top of this car. We're going to show you something that's just absolutely unbelievable for the first time ever after 44 years of Mustang history. Now, the crew here at Buckeye Restoration is going to remove the top, the convertible top, all the bolts, not just the material. We're taking out the whole structure. Everything is coming out. It's going to expose the top of the wheel wells or the top of the wheel tubs. And there is something very interesting in there that we're going to show you. This is only on a pre-production prototype car. There's nothing like this from the factory, and we're going to show you why it was so important for these cars to build the way that they were, so that when they encountered problems, that they could fix them quickly before they went into regular production. So let's take her down there, guys.
Wait for that thing to quit? Yeah, hold on. Hey, Brian, hold on a second. We're going to make sure this thing's done running.
Hey, Jeremy, we're going to wait till this stops, okay? Yeah. Okay, after 44 years, we're going to expose something that no one has ever seen. This is history for any Mustang enthusiast. After 9 million Mustangs have been produced from up until April of 2008, we're going to be showing you the birth of the Mustang and how these cars were engineered and put together pre-production from the factory.
Watch the parts.
Okay, now we've got the top removed, and Nate and Brian from Buckeye Restoration is going to join me here, and we're going to be telling you what we found here. This is unbelievable. You want to give them the news here, Nate, to start with, what this is? I mean, you get it, and I get it, but let's let everybody understand what is the big importance about the top of these wheel wells.
What we found here is that they had an engineering problem when they started to put the top down. And it looks like they pounded it down with a hammer, and all the original welds are intact here. So it's definitely a change they did when the top went go down.
Yeah. Now, Brian, on that side, it looks to me like it's a little bit deeper, wouldn't you say, than this side, the way that they pounded it down here?
Yeah, it's definitely, they're uneven. You can tell this was just hand beat. Definitely for the bow clearance for the top, because it laid way up here.
So what we know, and we're looking back here on the trunk lip, we got a production part date here of 11/11/3, which is November 11th, 1963. So all of the parts were pre-manufactured. And we know from car number 173 that is in England, they found during the restoration of that particular car labels inside the car that said pre-production parts. We did find some labels here, but we couldn't see anything as they were old and they probably just fell off. So the parts that we're looking at right now were probably, and we'll try to get a date code off these wheel tubs, but these were probably built in November or December. These cars started to be assembled in January and February of 1964 when they were working on them as a group. Now, we're going to show you the radio too. The radio's got a stamped date, being that it was ready to go, January 24th, 1964. But on the top of the radio, there's a date stamp of February 1964, which means it was put in the car. So they were working on this car, not over a day or an afternoon. It was a long period of time to work on this car and the group of all the pre-production cars to iron out all of the problems. Wouldn't you say, Nate?
I agree. This car here showed so much so far, and we'll be going over that shortly.
Okay. That's what I want to do. All right, Nate, what is this? This is a port panel for
the convertible reinforcement structure is right here.
Okay.
And it's dated 12/6 of 63, shift 3. It was stamped on.
Okay, that's on the driver's side of the car.
Correct.
Okay, Brian, what do you have on that side?
12/6 B363.
Same.
Okay, so it's the same. So obviously, we know that part of the parts here for the convertible top mechanism was built in December 6th of 1963. So all of these parts had to be pre-manufactured and brought out to where these cars were going to be assembled. So it's like taking a huge model and trying to put it together with parts that have never been tested and have never been put together on a car. Now, Nate, if we can walk up here in the tunnel here, and Jeremy's going to come around here and show this, but this is kind of unique here with this tunnel. What is this that we found? With
that hole in the floor was used for 3 or 4 speed cars for the backup lights. Being this is an automatic, why is the hole there?
Yeah, and it's a good question. I do know that Dan Gurney test drove in early February of 1964 one of the Mustang convertibles that was a red car like this car, and it was a 4-speed. Could possibly be that they switched the transmissions around. We don't know, but there's that tells me that's a possibility that this might have been the car that Dan Gurney drove on the test track. And he wrote an article that was in Popular Science magazine, May of 1964, and he ran the car through his paces. So it's a possibility that this could have they could have built it with a 4-speed in it, right?
Correct. Yeah. Absolutely correct on that.
Okay, now Nate, inside here in the dashboard, and Jeremy's going to show the folks this inside piece here. Tell us what's so unique about that and why they took a torch to cut it.
What's unique about this interior piece here is it looks like they used a torch to get the quick change of speedometer cable. When they were building these cars, they're probably taking them apart, and they said, oh, this is a problem, we can't get the speedometer cable quick enough. So it looks like they cut that with a torch. And the reason being, they get their hand in there to disconnect the speedometer cable and be simple. We got the speedometer cable out of this car in about 30 seconds compared to, messing around and playing with it, try to get it in and out. But this was quick, very simple.
Now, the other body that we have over there that you're doing a restoration on a K-code car, that panel is gone completely.
Correct, that is not there at all.
So we've shown you some of those changes that are there. Now, I'm kind of theorizing here that with these, all the plug-ins, the lights, and all the gauge cluster, everything that's being plugged in, there's a possibility to take it in and out or use it for training.
And very quickly, too. There are some unique things here, like we saw with the numbers here that are labeled. Jeremy said it looks like a laundry pen, and I have to agree. Back in the day, that's what they probably would have used.
Yeah, and it's kind of unique because as kids go to school, for example, and they get different educations in the different eras and decades, they write a little bit different. I've seen a lot of writing from the engineers of notes that they took from 1964, and this writing definitely, as far as the numbers, correspond with what I've seen as far as some of the early Mustang history. All right, Nate and I are at the back of the car, and there's some differences in this rear valance, and Nate's going to tell you about that. On the rear taillight panel, actually, the corners are at like a 35-degree angle instead of at a 90-degree turn where they round off here. The pictures will show that. It's very unique, a very interesting piece. We haven't found a date code on it yet, but I'm sure when we get it stripped down, we'll find something. Also, there's no seams in the trunk where the trunk panel here meets the quarter panel and the taillight panel. There is no seams there either. It's all filled with lead, it looks like. We're going to be finding that out a little bit later as we get the car stripped down. Now, the gas tank, the top of the gas tank, tell me what that's all about. The top of the gas tank, as soon as we were looking at it this morning, I go, something's different about this gas tank top. So sure enough, the ribs are different. We had the tape measure out and measured it, and it is different. They're off quite a bit. Very unique. Yeah, and you know, we're showing you obviously the other tank that you'll see here is a regular production tank. So there's a difference between the gas tank, tail panel. There's a lot of major differences in the car. Now we're going to move up to the front of the car, and we're going to show you some of the things that we found concerning the tire clearance and suspension. Now, Nate, we found something that's really interesting here. It looks like they had some clearance problems, and because of that clearance problem, what did they wind up doing here?
Well, what it looks like to me is they were going down the road, we were testing, and they couldn't turn right. So they took a torch to the front frame rail and cut it out so they could turn right.
Yeah, and we want to note here that on the regular production cars, which started in regular production of March 9th, they changed this, and they were actually stamping that area out from the factory.
That's correct. We had that proof with the other cars we have here.
Now, we're around the front of the car, and Nate found some unique things about the front parking lights on this particular car. What is it you found, Nate?
What we found here is the lead wire on this vehicle, original harness for the car, as you can see. You got 3 wires going to it. There is no ground wire. That's why we had the pictures before with the ground wire being ground to the body on both sides. Very unique. Never seen it before in my life.
Now the next step, you on, Jeremy?
Yes, we are.
Next step in the process, Nate's crew is going to come in here and start to chemically strip this car. Can you explain that a little bit, Nate, how that all works?
What we're going to use is we're going to use Sim XXX stripper, and XXX being is a very good stripper, aircraft quality. And we're going to put it all over the body panels here, and we're going to strip the seams and find out hopefully a lot of leads there.
I think so from what we've seen already, so let's get to it.
All right.
Now, one of the things that we're going to be looking for on this particular car, because this is a pre-production prototype car, we know from some of the other pre-production prototype cars that underneath the paint there was some lettering here. This has been repainted at one time, but they basically shot over old paint, and you can feel it and see some of the old paint that was applied during the process of when this car was built. Somewhere in January or February of 1964. So when they marked the steel with the markers that they used, over the period of time, after 44 years, for example, this actually etched into the metal. So it's going to be very exciting to see what we're going to find once we get this strip, to see if on this particular car there is any numbers there and codes. Now, we're going to show you the reproduction door panel that came out of Mustang number 140, and John has come up with something interesting that we're going to tell you about 64 and a half Mustangs that a lot of people don't know. He's got one of the original door panels here, and John, explain to us the difference between the original door panels for 64 and a half Mustangs to the reproductions and the door panels that they started using later on in late 64 and 65.
Okay, the difference between the 64 and a half door panels, if you look at the surface here, it is flat, right up against the board here in the back.
Yeah.
It's flat here, here, and also around the edges here. If you look at this reproduction one that was on 140, you notice it's padded here.
Yes.
And this was also on all 65 cars. It's padded here, padded around here.
Right.
Okay.
So they did that to kind of fill it out, make it a little bit more plush, the interior.
Correct. That's right.
Okay. Now, John, you removed this reverse light off of the rear panel, which they're stripping over there, which is kind of unique, and we're going to get to that panel, but we could tell that this was a little bit of custom work here. What did you discover when you pulled this apart?
Well, once we took this off here, we noticed a slot in here, obviously to drain water or condensation. Once we pulled it off, we found out that this is actually 1/8 inch rubber tubing that they had sliced to use as a gasket when they were putting this car together.
So they as they were going along building this car, obviously they were making whatever parts with whatever use that they had anywhere. So they took some rubber hose and they made a gasket for it. So that was the pre-production prototype. Now, as they went down and made these cars for regular production, obviously this was a part they had to manufacture, was a gasket for the backup lights.
That's right.
All right, now Nate has got the radio that came out of Mustang number 140, and there's some differences in an earlier radio. Now, what did you find, Nate?
What we found in this radio is there's popular to belief most 64.5 radios, from understanding, began with a 5 as the first number on the scale for the radio dial. This one begins with a 6. We know this is absolutely correct for this car. It was dated January 24th, 1964, and an install date of 2 8 of 64, I believe.
Yeah, that's
right
pretty
here.
Close, really.
And as you can see, it's all original, got all the markings on it, and it's a very unique piece.
Other thing that we were talking about too is the overspray so it wasn't exposed, so you couldn't see any of the paint missing in the dash. So obviously they sprayed this and then put it in, or they put it in and then sprayed it.
Or sprayed it twice, or if the car was, you know, used taken apart so many times, they just got tired of repainting the dash, or just taped everything off.
All right, Nate, tell us about this. This is another important discovery that we've made.
Right, it was, as I was pointing out to you the other day on this car before we took it apart, I showed you how the hockey sticks didn't fit correctly near the window there. And when we were tearing it apart, we found the original hockey sticks in the trunk, and you can see the lips on the front are completely different.
To the reproduction.
Correct. Or actually, they're not even the original factory ones. Didn't have that big a teardrop on the end. That's the difference.
That's the difference. Now, we found some interesting things when the stripping process was done to the door jambs on this car. And we found a lot of lead, we found some brass, and we found some things with the doorpost that I'm kind of shocked, but we'll get to that in a minute. But anyway, I want Nate to explain to you a little bit about what we found here. A tremendous amount of lead in the seams here.
When we first looked at this car yesterday, we noticed it was seamless. And today we stripped it down. You can see the lead in the seams here to make it absolutely smooth, both in the quarter post and in the door post.
Now, also we found some brass here.
Correct.
Explain that.
The brass is in the corners here for welded, and it's also down at the bottom right here.
Now, Nate, did any regular production cars off the assembly line have any brass on them?
They did have a brass, yes. They've been brassed here.
Okay.
And down in the back.
Okay.
They were
You
brass.
ever find any brass?
I never seen brass there.
Okay. Now, the seams. Have you ever seen seams like this?
I've never seen them filled with lead.
Production?
Never ever.
Okay.
Nope.
Now, moving up here to the doorpost. This is really, we're all shocked about this. We have a date code here of 11/8/63.
Yeah.
And the other one, which we're going to get to, we found is a month difference in the manufacture of the part. Now, that to me is really unusual, because you've got two different groups of parts that would have been made in 2 different months. So obviously you can have some differences there by the
Correct.
manufacturer. And what we found up here is a lot of lead up in the corner here.
In the seam here, which was originally seam sealer from the factory, that's all lead here. That's all lead in through here, here, and here. It's totally seamless.
Yeah, now we're kind of brainstorming here, and what we're coming up with, and we see a little bit of indentation here. There's a lot more on the other side, but what we're speculating here is that when they were building these cars, they were trying to get the right fit and finish on it, because this is all hand built. They're using parts that weren't ready for actual production parts, so they had to custom fit everything. That's the end result with a lot of the lead work that we're seeing here. Yes?
I agree, 100%.
Now, on the driver's side of the car, we're standing here with Brian, too, who's took a air grinder and ground off the rest of the paint that was on the car after the stripping process was down. You found a little bit of Bondo here. We know that didn't come from the factory, but you think possibly the lead was taken out here and then filled in with the Bondo for whatever reason.
Yeah, I believe the last people that may have worked on this car, whether this might have had a blister or something, and they just overground the lead out of there, then they just replaced it with fiberglass.
Right. Now we know from looking at this and this indentation that's here, and Jeremy's going to give you a close-up here, this definitely was from the factory. There's no way that there was any damage after the fact in the last 44 years on this car. Looking at this, would you say that this car had this indentation in it, and then they filled it with lead at the factory?
Yeah, I'd say they used some kind of tool or device for alignment when they built this car. I don't believe, because there's no damage to the rocker, even when you look at the backside here, there's no damage that indicate that this has ever been hit or anything. I believe it was just damage from assembly of the vehicle.
Okay, now we're going up here to the front. Now, Nate, point out this date code up here. Okay, now we're looking at the driver's side doorpost here, and we've got a different date code. Brian had went inside, shined a flashlight, and could tell that this was a December part. And on the passenger side, we have a November 11th part. Now, Nate, what would you say here? We see a lot of evidence
A
here.
lot of hammer marks, it looks like.
And it looks like they're trying to
Make it fit.
make it fit and get an adjustment right.
Right.
And that's a huge...
All right, and you can definitely see it here how it's hammered and it's leaded. The hammer marks are fixed with lead. You can see it as plain as day.
And then back here in the corner that Jeremy was already looking at, it almost looks like they put some porta power or something.
To make the door shut, yes.
Yeah. So they were tweaking this car. They were trying to get all these parts to fit right. And obviously, I can't believe that they've got 2 different months of 2 different parts from something as important as this. And I think maybe they probably had a little bit more difficulty on this side because of the difference in the part from here to there. What do you think?
I agree.
Okay, we're working here with Dick Strawman, a special guest here today, and he's going to demonstrate the old school way of doing lead work. This is a art that you never see anymore because of the standards of lead. Obviously, you can't work around in a lot of the shops today with lead like you did back in the 50s and 60s. And that was before they had Bondo, but this is the way it used to have to be done with the lead work, and this is quite unique here with what Dick is going to do. Dick, can you explain a little bit what you're doing now? What did you put down on the metal first?
Ruby fluid to make the solder stick, the lead stick.
Okay.
And now I have to heat the lead.
Okay.
Doesn't take too much heat.
There it goes. It's starting to run a little bit.
Haven't done this for a long time.
I can tell you were good at it because you're getting it on there, so that's pretty good. Now, is this like soap?
It's like tallow
Okay.
to keep the paddle from sticking.
Okay, now we've got the lead down, and you're going to heat it to smooth it, right?
Yeah, I hope so.
Look at that, huh?
Look at that. That's the way that it used to be done. Back in body shops, when they started to get fender benders in cars, this was the standard way that they had to remove dents
Before Bondo.
before Bondo. And it's a lost art because nobody uses lead today to straighten out panels. Now this was a dent you're working on here right now to get the dent out, right, Dick?
Yeah, we used this in places where you couldn't get behind a pick and dog.
Right, because you used to pick and file some of the dents out,
Yeah,
right?
especially when the fenders were bolted on, that you could reach behind them. You can work this as much as you want till you get it smooth.
It's looking great.
Then we need some free wax remover cleaner to take the tallow off.
Oh, okay, I see. So after you get this smooth and you cleaned it down, then it would be ready to sand and prime, right?
Yeah. I'll put a little more on there. I'm not very good at it anymore.
You look pretty darn good to me, buddy. That's a craft that you hardly see anybody ever doing anymore. So after you would get the lead down, and now you remove the tallow,
Yeah.
and then in a shop, to finish this dent, you would have taken a sander, obviously, and
Either
sanded it out.
file it with a file or grind it.
Okay,
That was before we knew lead dust was harmful for you.
right.
Hey there, hook up there. You want a piece of hose there?
I need some wax and bleach remover.
Wax and grease remover, Dave? Where's the wax and grease remover?
Yeah, just keep filming this, Jeremy, and we can cut through all this stuff. Now you're going to, it's obviously getting a little bit harder to lead. You can still work with it a little bit, but you have a file, so you get the high spots down with the file,
My
right?
file was kind of dull anymore. You used to just peel right off.
how that's coming off? You see that with the camera, Jeremy?
Yeah.
It's getting all flush now and flat.
Just push the button there. That's one of those modern technologies there, Dick.
Yeah, look at that, how smooth that's coming out there.
Need to clean it off a little better. Kind of get that flux off. Grease. Yeah. I should have put a little more on there. The grinder will work better.
Yeah, definitely. I understand that. That's okay. We've got the gist of what it is.
Let me grind it off. It'll look, like this here.
Yeah.
I did that spot this morning.
Yeah, that looks fantastic. So now I can see how the file is almost like Bondo. Before the Bondo gets hot, and you can still use a cheese grater on the Bondo to get down the high spots. With the lead, it's the same, kind of the same principle.
It's hard to, you can't get behind this to hit it at all.
Right.
But I should have put a little bit more on there. I'll show you.
Here, I gotta hook it to another port here, Dick. Yeah. Just wait a second, I'm gonna hook it to another port.
Must be wasting a lot of film here, huh?
No, that's all right.
Okay, go ahead.
See, we can edit all this stuff, so don't worry about it. We'll have you doing this in 3 minutes, complete, start to finish.
Here, I'll get it. This is new technology here. There.
Yeah, let's get this out of the way here. John, you want to...
See where the lid is or where the metal quits.
Yeah, exactly.
You can also see there's no sparks on the lead, and you got sparks on the steel.
Yeah, the lead doesn't make any spark. I should have put a little more on there. And that won't come out.
Right. That's
It's bonded permanently to the
whole lot
surface.
better than
You
Bondo.
want me to add a little more to that?
Oh, that's okay. I think we get the gist of it. That's fantastic.
Yeah, I can fill that up a little more.
Now, when you were doing this on production wise at the body shops, okay, you pick and filed a lot of the dents, but the ones that you couldn't, you would use the lead to get the dents out.
Back then, a lot of the fenders were bolted on, and we could get behind it to pick
Right.
them out with a tool like this.
Okay.
We could pick them out like this.
Right.
We didn't know where it was at. You hit the finger, so you go underneath there and go like that. And then we'd file some more, sometimes lead some more, and then there's all kinds of. Here's one that's a file that's rounded.
Wow, look at that. Yeah. Wow. Never seen
So,
that.
hang on a second, let me get a good shot of that.
Yeah. Let me hold it up to the camera, Jeremy. That's I've
all
never
kinds
seen
of
it.
Go back where you were.
All kinds
There
of
you go.
files.
See it, Jeremy?
That's incredible.
I've never
And
seen
then
it.
here's a oval-shaped paddle. These are all maple paddles.
All to get that custom shaping of the
That was
lead.
used to spread the lead, right?
Yeah, if you had a groove, like you'd go in there like that and go.
Oh, okay. I see. Yeah.
It's like the guys doing drywall. You get the custom
Yeah,
seam.
like drywall, and only with a torch, and then
So-
and all kinds of dollies.
This is your dolly, right?
Yeah,
So,
we go behind that. This fender is all filled in underneath. You can't do any.
yeah, you can't
Yeah.
maybe get in that one section
Yeah.
there. That's about it.
That's why they use partly why they use Bondo anymore. But lead we used to get in 50-pound boxes. Now it's about $12 to $15 a pound.
Yeah.
Really?
If you bought a 50-pound box, it was pretty expensive. If you buy it now.
Now, I'm just curious, okay, a lot of the 40s cars, obviously you could unbolt the fenders and take them off and walk down to the 30s cars.
Yeah, or you could leave them on, you could reach behind it with enough room to pound them out.
Right, but when you got into the 50s cars, in other words, you get a little bit more difficult to work on.
Especially now, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Very few people use lead anymore except some real fancy restorers.
Right.
for the old cars.
Yeah, for the old cars. We're
Yeah.
talking about the true classics.
See, if I had a little more on there.
Yeah, that
There's
looks
a spot here I
fantastic.
just fixed and it came
Yeah,
out a
look
lot
at that.
better.
You see that there,
You
Jerry?
make another spot if you want.
Oh, that's fine.
Actually, you know what?
Are you ready?
Yeah.
Now Brian's finishing the process of stripping the radiator support. We've uncovered some numbers here. That's what I suspected we'd find on a pre-production car, and right now they're starting to come out. We're going to finish getting the numbers to where we can see them a lot clearer when he strips this down, and then we're going to show you what these numbers are. There's been a lot of speculation as to what all of these numbers mean, but we do know that some of them would be 76, for example, means that it is a convertible. So as we go through this whole process here and we get this finished stripped down, then we'll show you the rest of the numbers that are on pre-production number 140 convertible. Okay, Brian has got the front radiator support stripped, and now we have revealed the letters that we were talking about earlier. Now, this is real important. Most of the pre-production prototype Mustangs all had these markings in the front. And what happened is they marked them from the factory on the bare metal, and then they were sealed with paint, and obviously over the course of years they've etched themselves in permanently in the metal itself. Now, we've got over here on the passenger side, we have C9, 76A on the second line, third line is J6, fourth line is BL, fifth line is RN. Then to the right on the driver's side, it's hard to see, but it says number 41, and then below that 17. And then Nate, we've got a date code there.
12/9 of 2C.
Okay, and that was December
9th, second shift, 63.
1963. So we know for sure that all the parts that we found in this car was November 63 and December of 63. Now we're going to show you some more of the lead work in the rear of this car.
That was actually third shift.
Third shift?
Third shift.
Cool. After 44 years of speculation about early Mustangs and early Mustang production, we've solved a lot of those mysteries here in the last 2 days at Buckeye Restoration out in Boardman, Ohio. We've uncovered some facts that will set the Mustang enthusiast on their ear, because we've discovered some things that no one ever knew before until this car was taken apart. So from all of us here at Buckeye Restoration out in Boardman, Ohio, we want to remind all of you to keep cruising! Yeah, that's a good one.
Now we throw the chassis music.
Yeah, because our show closed.